Morning, everyone. Good morning. It's been a while since I got back into consulting, and when I got back in, and especially in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 months, I noticed things that I was trying to solve way back when. And so I was wondering what's going on. And so that was the starting point for this talk, where I tried to reflect back on a period of time to see how things have actually progressed and whether we actually made a difference. So a brief history. This is not a history of Agile. This is a history of what's happened in this community, with us, in Johannesburg, Cape Town. Around 2000, there were a few of us that were the early adopters of extreme programming. Small little sprinkles. We didn't even know that we were actually doing that. There were more of us. I fell in love with it. It was a harsh, tough mistress to keep. But I persevered, and I still can't say that I've conquered it or have mastered it. But it was the early adopters of extreme programming. It was refreshing. Its purpose was to create safety for programmers. That's what it was. And how we can actually build software in a very precise way with a lot of good values, etc. The early adopters of that. It took about 5 years before there was an XP user group in Johannesburg. It was formed by a company called Cybergate, together with the JCSE. They were part of putting that together. And it went on for many years. That was back in the day when Agile still had a small a. It wasn't a noun with a big A. Around 2007, so a lot of that activity was happening in Johannesburg. That whole XP stuff was happening in Johannesburg. Nothing was happening in Cape Town and Durban because those places are not extreme. Okay? They chill. And then Scrum came to town. That was around early 2007. So there's early adopters of Scrum. For some reason, it started happening in Cape Town. Maybe it was a chilled out way because you weren't really dealing with code, just methodology. And it was fine. All right? So it was an easier mistress to have on the side. By 2008, there was a Scrum user group that was formed. There was a Scrum user group conference. And suddenly, they changed the capitalization of Agile to capital A. And I think it went with certification, because there's a capital C. But that's be that as it may. By 2012, it was starting to get fairly balanced between Cape Town, Johannesburg. I don't know what the people in Durban, Bloemfontein, Kimberley, Port Elizabeth, etc. were doing, but those were two cities where I was spending time. By 2012, we had the first Agile Africa conference. That was back in an old theater with broken seats in Bloemfontein, which was fantastic. I loved it, absolutely loved it. It was in the heart of a community. We also started seeing this thing called Kanban started taking root in some organizations. They wanted to do Kanban, which is incredibly harder than doing time boxes, in my opinion. But it was fresh, so found another mistress. By 2015, everyone wanted to go buy DevOps. Every shop in town, enterprise or product or startup, wanted DevOps. And so it was DevOps everywhere, and no one could decide whether it was a culture, a phenomenon, a movement, a cult, a set of practices, principles, etc. But we wanted it, and we went and asked our mothers and said, "Mom, can we please have DevOps?" And so we did that. There was also SAFE, right? Because that's got to deal with the enterprise, because none of the other stuff preceding this will work in enterprise. None of it works in enterprise, therefore we have SAFE. By 2017, like last year, I was starting to hear people say, please don't say Agile in this company. Not a big A, not a small a. Don't say Agile. So what the heck is going on, right? We also saw Scaled Agile come to the shores, and there was the 5th Agile Africa conference. And now it's 2018 and we're standing here and I'm standing here with you. I know why I'm here because I want to talk about this stuff. Why are you here? Seriously, I'm asking a question. It's not rhetorical. Why are you here? I know Oz is here because he's got to introduce people and he's part of organizing and things. But why are you here? Why did you come to Agile Africa? Because I know it's 2 days free leave and it's not docked against your leave, right? And you get a free chow at lunch and stuff like that. But there must be a bigger reason why you want to be here. And I'm hoping it is to learn something and to go back and actually apply it and make a shitload of a difference back where you came from. I'm hoping it's that. The thing is that over all these years, 18 years at the bare minimum, since I started dabbling with this, and I've been asking, have we improved as much as we intended? Have we done that? We had such lofty goals and aspirations, etc., and we were going to release software every 2 weeks. Then Facebook and others came along and said, no, you need to release it 15,000 times a day across 25 data centers in the world. And so then we want to do that, but we can't get to the 2 weeks. 2 weeks we can't get to. So have we improved as much as we intended to? Generally speaking, I don't think so. I really don't think so. If you start off your Scrum journey, your XP journey, your Kanban journey, whatever mistress you've tried to keep on the side, did you meet what you set out to do? In 18 years as a community, I think we've made small changes, not big changes. And some of those changes have not stuck. So I stepped back and said, what do we do? So this is the way I understand what we do. There's a problem, we have some conversations, someone goes and does a design, we write some code, the code gets run, it gets executed. That is what we do in plain simple terms. Some people do this. They use, instead of conversations, they write lengthy Word documents. Instead of design, there's incredible number of PowerPoint slides. Instead of coding, they hack and patch something together. They call it integration. Instead of running, they have a bottle of aspirin or something next to them because they know it's going to be painful, right? We laugh, it still happens. It happens in places where I've been to not too long ago, this year, that have been doing something called Agile with a capital A for years. And it still happens. It's okay. At least you got the aspirin. So this is the way I break this down. There's two things we're doing. One is, in the early stages, we're trying to understand what the hell to do, and the other one is an application of that understanding. So prove we actually know what we did. We actually understood it, and we can do something about it, and it demonstrates that. And that's working software, in the hands of customers, in the hands of users. We also do this. We fix mistakes, because there's bugs everywhere. It's not going to go away. We are human. We're fallible. We fix our design. Some people call this refactoring. You should be doing it. We fix our understanding. That is, we've had these conversations. We've internalized it. We should go back and play it back and try to understand more. Maybe there's an insight that we've realized, or there's something that requires clarification, so we do that. Less common is this thing called pivoting. That is that you have software that's running in production, and you realize it's actually not the thing that we should be doing. And so you switch tracks, and you do something else. And that came with something which I didn't put down, which I should have put down as part of the history, which is around the Agile, the lean startup movement, right? So that comes from that mistress. But it doesn't happen as frequently as we think. Once we've set our course, we live with it. So in doing all of this, we have these conversations, design, code. We're trying to understand, we're trying to apply our understanding. All those feedback loops there, we're actually trying to observe, we're trying to tweak, we're trying to learn, we're trying to improve. That's the loop that we actually go through. Okay. Some of us do better at it, some of us do bad at it. Some of those mini loops we're better at. I know we're good at fixing bugs. That I know. I know we're not good at fixing design because that's incredibly hard. And I know we're actually pretty dismal at confirming understanding because we're building the wrong things. And I know we're pretty bad at confirming understanding because the stories that you take into your sprints last forever, and they are not testable, and they don't have the detail you need, etc. So we're good at fixing bugs. It's reactionary. It's okay, it's better than doing nothing. So 18 years of building software, I've learned that building software is incredibly difficult. It's a lot harder trying to do it in an agile way, trying to do that in a short time frame, in a short time box, trying to get the right combination of people to work in an intense pressure cooker environment, because that's what it is incredibly difficult, from the personalities to the culture to all the psychological things that we talk about in these conferences, and the practices and the principles and the values and all of that. It's incredibly difficult. And we need to calm down, because it is difficult, but it doesn't mean that it's okay to not try to get better. But I do know for a fact, and I've seen it in isolation, it pays off. When it clicks, it pays off. And when you don't have it and you move to your next gig, you wish you still had that same. So much for the history, so much for the big picture view. So let's talk about agile rabbit holes. Last night I was thinking of changing this to no holy cows. Some of it might seem controversial to you. Some of you might have a visceral reaction and shake and quiver, but it's okay. It's aspirin. But I want to have an honest conversation with you, based on things that I've observed, and having spoken to other people who've been in this game for a while as well. So I want to speak about that. Open, honest. If I'm off the mark, you shout it out and tell me you're off the mark and you can hold your position. Rabbit hole number one. It's too safe to fail. So you know this thing that we talk about? It's a safe place here. It's safe to fail. And I think that's a good thing, to create that level of safety. It's absolutely a good thing. We do need that. We shouldn't be working in fear. We shouldn't. The problem is that, what do we think about when we say failure? What do you consider as failure? Not delivering. Okay? Anyone else? Sorry, can't hear? Delivering the wrong thing. It's the same. I've got 2 for delivering the wrong thing, and the other one is not delivering. You can break it down to quite a few things. And there's a lot more. I was just trying to think about it. So would you say being unprepared for backlog grooming is a failure? You know that moment, right? You go into backlog grooming, you're the analyst at the table, and you come in there with half-assed stories and trying to push it off in that 1 hour. Or you're a developer who should have read the stories before you walked in, and you have no idea what's going on, but you're ready to do estimation and share a comment. We know that game. I think coming into backlog grooming unprepared is a failure. Being late for stand-up, I think is failure. You're shifting the course of the day. A bad release, be it the wrong thing or late, not meeting sprint commitments. We said we're going to do this, and then you don't make it. I think that's a failure. Being over budget, maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. It's an absolute failure when it is repeated behavior and when it is not corrected. That's how I think about failure. Repetition of doing something against what was expected and what we expected of each other, and it was not corrected. So there's signs that you're in this rabbit hole. Your back channels are more active than your retrospectives. Who's sniggering? You know what I'm talking about. The back channel is, you know, you run your retrospective, and then you're done, and everyone's at the cupcakes, and then you go outside, and 3 people are standing there on the side, and the conversation is going on and on and on. And then the coffee break and the cigarette break ends up with more valuable information than what is happening in the tea room. Your back channel has more bandwidth than what's right in front of you. There's more things going on in the background. Some of it is complaints, some of it is actually decisions being made, independent of what's actually happening in front of you. So your back channels are more active than your retrospective. It's more active than the communications happening in front of you. So we call that the rumor mills, we call it the gossip pipeline, whatever you want to call it. I call it the back channel. There's a case where emotions win over logic and reason. The most emotional people in the room, everyone can't deal with it. It's like, oh, that's fine. It's okay. Oz, it's fine. Yes, you're right. Not that Oz is emotional. Not that Oz is emotional. But the logic and reason is left in despair because emotion is so overwhelming. It happens. It's a sign. Anonymous feedback is a horrible thing. We espouse transparency, then we have anonymous feedback. That's nonsense, absolute nonsense. Don't do it. If we have something to say, it should be said. This one is a big deal for me. Critical straight talkers are marginalized. There are people who are intent on using logic and reason with facts at hand and want to talk about it, and they are considered difficult. You know what really gets me? When you have an incredibly smart, intelligent, talented woman who's speaking vocally about a point, as vocally as another man who has less intelligence, and the man wins. Because the man actually gets emotional. And that shit has got to change. Respect each other for what it is and what they are and what they're bringing to the table. In any team that I've worked in that has gelled and has found a way to work, there's a high degree of straight talk in an incredibly respectful way. Last one here that I'll call out is parent shopping. How many parents in the room? Yeah. And when your child comes to you and says, Dad, can I have this because mom said that, and then you go to mom and you play that game, parent shopping. People in teams parent shop. That's a bad sign because they're trying to create an information asymmetry. They work in the back channels, and that's a problem. They should feel comfortable enough to actually deal with it. So those are just signs. How do you fix this, though? Oh, that's the other thing. I was thinking about calling this, the magic silver bullets, holy water, wreaths of garlic and wooden stakes talk. But here's what I figured out, right? Is that firstly, you've got to understand your business. You actually got to understand your business. You've got to model it and understand it in actually a very simple machine. And surprisingly, your software is part of the business. So put your software in there. The act of building software is part of your business. Put it in the machine. Model it. And when things go wrong, it's okay. You've created a safe place. Ask what happened. Why did it happen? What was the impact? Was it a serious impact? Was it okay? Was it extinction class? What was the impact? Okay? And who was at the wheel? That's the controversial one, I think. Who was at the wheel? Where did the buck stop? Who was responsible? Who's running the show? Who was there when this happened? When you ask that question, what you want to establish is whether the problem is with the machinery that you've designed, which is the system of things, your business, or whether it was a problem with a particular person. Now it sounds harsh. I told you about holy cows. If it was the machine, tweak the machine. Make the adjustment. Build a new feedback loop. Measure something. Tweak it. If it was a person, you've got to be incredibly humane. So either the person doesn't have the skills, and training and teaching can help fix that. or the person doesn't have the ability for that particular role. And the best thing is to change the person in that role. It is by far, I think, the most humane thing to do. It is better for that person who's waking up stressed, not knowing how to accomplish their job, because they don't have the ability, and rather have someone who is tuned to that. I've been in those positions where I don't have the ability for the job. I'd rather move out and find something that actually where I can contribute. Next one, quitting in the abyss. So why do we quit? So the abyss is this, you're doing great and then things start going wrong and you're at the trough and then you quit. I read this book, it's like 50, 60 pages. This guy, Seth Godin. I didn't like the book. I don't like, it read like a motivational talk. I don't like those books, right? But that's my issue. But there were some useful things and then it reminded me and led me to this. So you know those moments at the project when the wheels are falling off, you're going through that dip, and then all the things that you said you will do as a good Agile citizen, you stop doing. You stop doing your retrospectives. You start increasing scope in the middle of a sprint. You add 15 more people in another team in another location. Bring 3 more analysts, and yes, that will fix the understanding. So we do all the things that we said we won't do. A good team is the one that can pull out of the trough. That's when you actually get a good team. The ones that actually hold it together and see it through. Upwards, not downwards. See it through upwards. Okay. So quitting. Why do we quit? Sometimes you just get scared. Sometimes you realize it wasn't that important. You undertook a venture that wasn't that important. So you quit. You run out of time or money. You're doing the wrong thing. It's fair to quit. You have short-term focus. So you're not worried about the long play. And the last one, which is another holy cow, is settling for mediocrity. The thing about this, getting out of that dip, is that this is probably one of the toughest holes to get out of, because when you're in there, man, the only thing you have is your spade and you tend to dig deeper. Unfortunately. It actually requires you to slow down in order to start rebuilding that level of that hole. It's incredibly difficult, but there's things I think you can do which can preempt it. But you need to know and try to look ahead a bit. So there's 3 things. One is you're walking a death march. That is, you're in the trough. It doesn't matter what happens. It's death all the way down, right? The worst thing will happen is that it'll just make people unhappy. You are climbing some way, but it's not at the level that you need. It's aiming for mediocrity. The product is going to be pretty mediocre in the market. Why build it? Might as well quit. That's reasonable. It's a worthless effort. It's not going to have an impact. It's not even mediocre. It's worse than mediocre. So know where you are on that curve of getting things done. And then to try to preempt it, actually sit down before you get going and write down the conditions that will cause you to quit. Name it. If you run out of money, are you prepared to quit? If you're going to run out of time, are you prepared to quit? If you realize that it's not what you thought is needed in the market, are you prepared to quit? Write down the things that will force you to quit. Name the second and third order consequences of quitting and not quitting. That is, don't think about the immediate outcome and consequence. Think about what will happen as a domino effect going on from that. If we don't do this and we quit, what will happen after that? What will happen after that? Think about that. So that's about speaking to the long play. This is something that's come up in the last 6 months or so. Don't rush to build. Converge on the problem and potential models. Every single team that I've worked with in the last 6 months have claimed that they're all on the same page, and we bring 5 to 20 people, sometimes 40 people together, and no one is on the same page. No one can tell you what the problem is. No one can tell you which direction they need to walk in. The moment you ask people to explain themselves, it's completely divergent. And so you're after convergence of the problem and what potentially might work. You need to conceptualize the model, and you confirm it with data. That is, build that machine that I was talking about previously, build it in your head, build it on paper. Use data to confirm those things. And then realize it fast. We know how to do integration. Don't worry about the integration. Back yourself to solve the integration problem and get the machinery working as fast as possible. Aim for it in 6, 8 weeks. Get it done. And then start building on all the other bits and pieces. Number 3 comes on from this previous one, accepting mediocrity. So what is the gap between the best and the rest? Market leaders versus market followers. Some things that I've read have said it's about 10 times. Market leaders are about 10 times ahead of the rest. And so once you gain that market lead, you don't want to lose that 10 times. Once people crouch into the 10 times, less than 10 times, you're in trouble. How true that is, I don't know. But I do know there's an incredible gap between some of the teams I've worked with that are phenomenal and some teams that are mediocre. There's signs for this. One is that it takes longer to socialize a change in an organization than it is to build your backlog. You know that thing, especially those of you who come from large enterprise. I can't do this until I speak to so-and-so, and then Chris over there, he needs to speak to that person, and then that person needs to be that person, and then 3 months later, there'll be a forum and a committee where it's tabled for 10 minutes. And by then, what have you achieved? So there's signs of that. The stories are untestable. You have stories that come into a sprint, and there's no way that you can test it. The product is an incompatible set of features that are just glued together. There needs to be some coherence to the product. It needs to work as people understand it in their heads. Don't go and change that and destroy the mental model of your software. If you're writing a mobile banking app, you need to log in, you need to check your balance, you need to pay someone, you need to do something else. But don't ask it to go and scan your driver's license. Don't do that. It doesn't fit in with that person's mental model. Imagine if you were writing a Word document in Excel. Suddenly Microsoft says, you can use all these styles and you can write long paragraphs in Excel. It's like, why? Why? You never have proper test data. How many of you have proper test data? A well-curated set of data that you can take into every single iteration that you can play. How many of you, let me ask you different, how many of you are scrambling to still find test data and don't tell me a copy of production is fine? Because you're not allowed to do that in certain sectors. You need a refactoring sprint. If people are asking for a refactoring sprint, there's something horribly wrong before that, eh? You put more effort into looking good than being good. You must make sure that sprint review was, and that chart, and those posters. This one we know about, yet we still do it. Too many people in the project and meaningless meetings. Too many. It's a whole mythical man-month story. So, there's several barriers you need to work through. There's what is necessary. If you have a banking system and you can't take deposits, it's extinction, right? It's game over. You close up shop, go and become a telco, do something else. It's the extinction zone. So you have to cross the extinction zone at the bare minimum. And that is doing what is absolutely necessary. There's a certain thing about what is acceptable. And that's the dangerous zone, because between what is necessary and what is acceptable is that zone of mediocrity. And so what happens is that you spend so much of time there, you end up normalizing that deviance, right? He says, that's actually okay. We're doing all right. We actually made that sprint. We actually did deploy. That's normal. No, that's not even acceptable yet. We're trying to get to acceptable. But what we're after is to break through acceptable barrier into the zone of damn hard yards. You're going to sweat it. It's long, it's hard, the curve, the gradient is steep. And that's when you get to excellence. When you're in the dip, never drop the bar of excellence. That's yours. And don't make the bar of excellence close to the zone of mediocrity. Don't do it. Set it there, keep it there, aim for it. One day you'll get there. So there's no easy fix for this one. In terms of teams, I think what works, even with large enterprise teams, what I find you have 10, 20, 15, 20, 50, 150 developers, and it's under 100,000 lines worth of useful code. 4 developers, 1 quality engineer, 1 analyst, 1 UX, 1 program manager. I'm saying the word program manager, I'm not using the word product owner because no one in industry, in any enterprise knows what's a product owner. They can't create it on the org chart. They make business analysts that, they make project managers a product owner. The program manager is the one that is responsible for holding the entire product in their head, understands the conceptual integrity of the product, understands what the users are after, understands the market, understands what's in play in every iteration. So that leads to the next one, conceptual integrity. That's what I spoke about scanning your driver's license. You need to stop personal productivity having negative generativity. So what I mean by that, the team generates an output. When you have that hero person who actually is going to sit there till 2 a.m. working on their own branch in Git, and come tomorrow morning before the sprint review, and now wants to merge this branch. You rather go in and confess your crimes than deal with that long-running branch that someone was doing on their own. That person has been incredibly productive, but worthless. But they worked hard. You need to focus on the output and figure out the inputs. So output is important. Know what you're getting, what you want out of this. Then figure out the input. You need to have the team. Okay. You know you have this org structure in your organization, and in order to get that person from there, you've got to go up here, come down here, go left, go there. Just get the person. And ask for forgiveness later, right? Your team includes the software, the logs, the data it generates, the data it collects, as well as the tools. That's your team. That team can't move without logs, cannot move without the data, cannot move without tools. Those things that we create that are inanimate is part of your team. You've got to incorporate it as part of your team. The moment you start doing that, you'll see that it's more than just features. It's everything else that goes with software. Okay, this one. Number 4. Unbelievable. I want to say lies. I want to say speaking lies. But the deck might get distributed outside of me talking here. So, unbelievable lies, guys. Come on. Like, we accept a project deadline that can't be achieved. It's like, can you finish this before code freeze in November? The whole team is in it like, there's no chance that's going to happen. It's like, yes. Yes, we'll do it. Oh, if you only just do that and integrate with that, oh God, that integration, oof, good luck with that team on the other side of that integration. We know it's not possible, but we lie to ourselves and accept the fudge from the other person. You fudge your sprint to look good in the review as opposed to declaring that we couldn't get this part to work because it's a legitimate thing that happened. Something caught you offside, you didn't expect it, it's okay. Don't fudge it. Don't try to look good. Be good. You spin measurements and reports to look good. You know that burn down chart is, but you'll put annotations all over it to say how amazing it is, and that's why you are here, and it's all right. But 3 sprints in a row, you're not making it. Something's going horribly wrong. And yet we'll say, no, we can still make the deadline. Can't. This one, writing worthless test to get the build to green. The amount of time I actually look at code where it's assert true or at ignore at the top of a class or whatever the hell there is these days is ridiculous. But okay, we got green bulb. Why do we lie? Why are you kidding yourself? So the fix is the opposite. You've got to ask if it's true. So try it out. In the next team meeting, someone makes some preposterous statement. Ask them, is it true? And then sit down and fold your arms. Is it true? The thing about asking that question is that you've got to get an answer from a credible source. You've got to get it from someone who actually knows what's going on, who understands it. And if there's no credible source in the room, we've got to find it. The second fix is knowing when to hold the line and when to walk. Holding the line is that you have absolute appreciation and full understanding that this, myself and my team, we can pull this off. It's going to be difficult. There's certain constraints, there's certain assumptions, etc., but we can hold it. We can make this thing work. And you're backing yourself. Yes, things could go in different directions, but you're backing yourself to get that output. You hold the line. It might not be the answer that people want to hear. It might not be before code freeze in November, and you could get there in March the next year, but hold that line. And you also need to know the opposite of that, when to walk. If it's a death march, walk. Walk. Stop wasting everyone's time. Number 5, to be ignorant of costs. There's costs baked into software that we don't often talk about. So do you know where the hotspots are in your code? What effort is being spent there? The distribution of knowledge across the entire code base. How long does it take to onboard another member of your team? I worked in large enterprises. I know it takes 3 weeks to get your access card, another 6 weeks to get your LAN point, and then your Jira login. And then it doesn't link up to your Git repository. And you're not allowed to use Trello. So all sorts of stuff, right? So how long does it take to get on board? My experience, from what I've observed, what I've learned, before someone can actually pick up a story and run with it on their own in a sprint, it's about 3 months. 3 months before someone is 100% productive on the team. That's what I found. Some places it can be faster, but don't be surprised. That's what it takes. So what's this thing called a hotspot? A hotspot is code that has far too many lines. It's longer than it needs to be, with high complexity, and it changes a lot. So there's this long file. It has indentation going off the screen. It's incredibly complex. And the amount of commits on that thing is just ridiculous. It's like all the time. Every day someone is committing on that file. That's a hotspot. And it's not one person, it's lots of people. So you have a high degree of people, high number of people stomping on that complex piece of code. That's a hotspot. So what I've noticed over the last few months is that a good code base has less than 5% hotspots. And takes up about 10% of your time. That's a good code base. 10% of your commits are going into 5% of your code base. That's a hotspot. That's good. Many code bases, though, have more than 10% of their code base are hotspots, and they easily consume 25% and more of effort. Basically what I'm saying is that you're spending a quarter of your time on 10% of your code base. If you've got 100,000 lines of code, 10% is 10,000. In that 10,000, there might be something that's about 2,000 lines, 500 lines, 300 lines that you could actually fix. No refactoring sprint given. Fix it. So, what's not the fix? Software is not a craft. Software is not an art. If you subscribe to the craft part, you'll fall short. We need to be pragmatic. We need to be disciplined. We need to do all sorts of things. Again, conceptual integrity is a big thing. Compatible mental models. So, I have an understanding of the software. You have an understanding of it. You have an understanding. You have not. There's a slight approximation to those. But when there's a significant overlap of my mental model with yours and yours and yours on the team, great things start happening. I'm not walking around trying to say I understand that. I could speak to you in the air and point to things, and you completely understand what I'm talking about. When the mental models start matching and start getting closer and closer together, that's when the magic starts happening. That's when you start accelerating. It requires an incredible amount of discipline, so don't give up on that discipline. So you've got to experiment in spite of uniformity. So organization might ask a whole bunch of things to be uniform and policies, etc., etc. I'm not saying be maverick. I'm saying be reasonable, don't break laws and things like that. But you need to experiment. And experiment, I don't mean that weird spike that someone says, oh, let me go and investigate MongoDB. Goodness sake, do that at home, right? Do it at home. But build a hypothesis around what you actually want the product to achieve, and then work with that. And then always, always value your data. Your data is more valuable than your code. Data will tell you everything. Number 6, and I'm very close to the end here, chasing rainbows. So we sit at these Agile conferences and we talk about a lot of things. And we scorn at things like KPIs, but they still exist. A few years back, I was at a Scrum gathering and someone was claiming to be the Chief Happiness Officer, the CHO. It was tongue-in-cheek, but anyway. So what do you want? Do you want happiness? Who wants happiness? I got some in my bag. You want some? See me afterwards. Hey, the herb is free now at home, eh? Come on, Oz. Do you want happiness? I'm not selling some legal. It's fine. You want a great score on your KPIs when you go for that review. Not unreasonable. Not unreasonable. Nothing to be ashamed of. You construct your entire project in 2-week milestones and you call them sprints. So you're chasing sprints. You want to get someone off your back. All legitimate things. That person annoys the hell out of me. I wish they weren't on this team. I wish I was on another team. Get them off my back. My boss, let me tell you what my boss does that. Get people off your back. It happens. Those are difficult things to try to solve. And I'll tell you about what I do to fix myself in those regards. I suffer from the same issues there. I realize I need to be useful first. Also, you and I were talking about this last night, and that's why I included it, because of you. So this one is because of Oz, the first line. If you're not useful, you'll be incredibly unhappy. Therefore, the corollary of that is that if you're useful and you make yourself useful and you're impactful, happiness is a wonderful side effect. You'll go home and you'll feel better. You won't go home and say, oh, today I screwed up the sprint, woohoo. Whatever I do defines my next version of myself. Every action has a consequence. And the moment I do it, my next version is there. There's no pull request, for your own version. There's no pull request, there's no long-running branches. It's a lot more, it's trunk-based development, guys. It's trunk-based development. The moment you do something, your next version is in the world. It's just the way it is. So it's not like you're stepping to the side and you'll try this thing on the side and then, those side things is all in trunk, So be honest. Be honest always. So there's times when you can't tell the truth. Doesn't mean you must tell a lie. Declare that it's not possible for you to share that truth. Sometimes things are a bit too contentious. Sometimes you need to protect something very personal about someone else. So now we need to learn to accept and appreciate criticism. That was one of the biggest learnings that I have. And never use my input as an excuse. If it didn't work, if I failed, if I didn't produce the output that I said I would, don't say I worked hard. You worked hard doing something wrong. So this is what we should be doing. Don't forget that. And these are the rabbit holes that I've mentioned. There's a lot more, but I think that's fine to start with. So thank you for listening to me. Thanks for enduring my holy cows. I'll be around for a bit, so catch me if you can.